Hi everybody, welcome back. Today I want to give you some examples, some worked examples of sentences which use prepositions as well as all the other structures that you've been looking at so far. We're looking at Jeremy Duff, Elements of New Testament Greek. We're halfway through chapter 4, and so we've got the halfway practice exercises in chapter 4, pages 48 and 49. I've chosen these exercises also because they highlight some things which are a little bit beyond what you've done already, things which we're going to come to at some point later, which may be useful for you to think about, as well as highlighting just one or two tricky moments. So let's jump straight in. I'm going to do numbers 1, 6 and 11. Let's kick off with number 1. Here goes. Dia ton logon to kuriou pistuo. Dia ton logon to kuriou pistuo. Now, you probably can't resist the temptation to identify the preposition straight away, right at the front of the sentence. And what you also want to do, I think, I encourage you just to recognize that you've got the complement which follows the preposition. Of course, there is a question then about where the complement ends. Does it stop here or does it stop here? We'll come to that in a moment. But remember, when I've told you before about translating Greek sentences, really try to discipline yourself and find the verb. I promise you'll thank me for this. If you always try to discipline yourself, find the verb first, because it will put the rest of the sentence in the right kind of structure. So just take a look at this. Very easy to find the verb, isn't it? The verb is pistuo, first person singular, which means I believe. Very easily translate that. So I believe. You've got the verb, you've got the subject already, and at this stage you're not going to have a separately lexicalized subject because it's the first person. So I believe, verb, subject, all sorted out. Now you look for the object. Now here's the first time you could go wrong if you're not being careful, because you look around for the object and you try and find something in the accusative case and your eye lights upon, oh, ton logon. Maybe that's the object, because ton logon is from hot logos. Ton logon is in the accusative, so maybe this makes sense. I believe the word. Oh, that's nice. Except, of course, what you saw previously and what you need to notice is that this accusative portion of the sentence is in the complement of a preposition. And that takes precedence over its other possible function as the object of a verb. Remember that a case is like a little label attached to a word telling you what that word is doing in the sentence. The accusative case could tell you that it's the object of a verb, or it could tell you that it's serving a particular function in relation to a preposition. But what you need to recognize explicitly at this point is that the preposition takes precedence over the potential function of ton logon as the object of the verb. Ton logon is not the object of the verb, it is the complement of dia. Okay, so I believe, there's nothing else in the accusative case, so you've got no object which is being believed. Therefore, what we've got to do is translate the rest of this. So, dia ton logon to kuriou. Well, what comes immediately after dia? Ton logon. So that's the first thing we need to consider as part of the complement. There might be more, as we noticed earlier, but let's look at this first. Dia plus the accusative. Dia plus the accusative means, I'm not going to keep going through those mnemonics, by the way. You need to go back to the video, 2 or 3 videos previously, the polar bear mnemonic, if you want a reminder. Dia plus the accusative means because or because of. There we are. So because of, ton logon is the word. Now, here's where it gets a little bit intriguing. Well, so far it makes sense. I believe because of the word, or because of the word I believe. But what do you do now with this portion of the sentence? To kuriou. To kuriou. Well, let's just parse it and figure out what it is first. It's from ho kurios, meaning the Lord, but it is in the genitive, and so of the Lord is how we might normally translate that. But how does it relate to the other parts of the sentence? Well, in this instance, it relates directly to what precedes ton logon, and so because of the word of the Lord, I believe, or I believe because of the word of the Lord. The tricky thing about that, of course, is this portion of the sentence, ton logon. Let me get another colour just to highlight it more prominently, this portion of the sentence is kind of floating around free slightly. It's not obviously attached to anything. Why, after all, should it belong with the complement of dear? Why can't it just go off somewhere else? Now, in this case, you can tell, just because of the meaning of the sentence, that it's the word of the Lord. That's the only real way to make sense of the meaning of the sentence. But in principle, it would be nice, wouldn't it, to have another way of identifying the fact that to kuriou, misreading my own words, to kuriou belongs with ton logon. Now, it turns out that there is a way of doing that. And you will almost certainly never find this sentence written in this form in sophisticated Greek. Later, in a few chapters' time, you will come across what is known as a sandwich construction. And if you want to look it up in the index of Duff now, then do so. But what a sandwich construction does is it provides a way of unequivocally identifying that to kuriou belongs with dear ton logon. Because what you would do with a sandwich construction is to pick this up and pop it in there, so that the complement would read dear ton to kuriou logon, where the sandwich is created by the bread of ton logon and the ham or cheese and pickle or whatever you like of to kuriou in the middle. Now, the really neat thing about that, and we'll come to this and talk about it at greater length when we talk about sandwich constructions in the future, but the really neat thing about that, of course, is that then you know that to kuriou belongs with ton logon, because you've got ton and you've got logon, and everything that's stuck in between by this rule of sandwich constructions belongs with it, and you know that the whole thing is the complement of the preposition, because the complement must include both the article and the noun that it goes with. So all of that is to say, if you find yourself looking at dear ton logon to kuriou and thinking, to kuriou, it's hard to figure out where it goes, you're actually exactly right. And sophisticated, proper Greek would solve that by using the sandwich construction. We'll come to that. You can look it up in the index if you want to get ahead of yourself. And it's quite simple, but it's a very, very powerful structure. We'll come to that at some point in the future. So anyway, at this point, this is fine. I believe because of the word of the Lord. That's how you translate this sentence. Of course, you might write, because of the word of the Lord, I believe. That's fine too. Either of those conveys the meaning of the Greek, and it's the meaning of the Greek that we're trying to get at. Okay, let's look at the second of these examples, number 6. Ho theos phile ta erga kata ton nomon. Ho theos phile ta erga kata ton nomon. Well, do what I've always asked you to do. Find the verb. Where is the verb? Where's the verb? Here it is. Phile comes from the verb phileo. An eo verb with a weak epsilon at the end of the stem. So let's decline it. Let's conjugate it. Let's go all the way through. Philo, philase, philei, philumen, philete, philusin. Philo, philase, philei, third person singular. So that means he or she or it loves, or perhaps is loving. You've got all those options, 3 potential subjects and 2 potential ways of glossing the verb itself. That's the verb. Now, it could have a separately lexicalized subject, couldn't it? Because it's a third person verb. So if you can find a noun in the nominative, then chances are that you've found the subject of this verb. Can you find a noun in the nominative? Look along here, look along here. Yes, of course you can. Here's a noun in the nominative. Ho theos is a nominative singular of God, the God, literally, but remember that in English translation, we don't normally translate the definite article when it comes with proper names. And so the way we're going to translate this is God, and God displaces the built-in subject of the verb. So ho theos phile, God loves, or God is loving. Right, so now we've done the verb, subject. What do we do next? We look for an object. And an object, you're looking for a noun in the accusative. So you look along here, and having forgotten everything that you ever knew about prepositions, you go, oh look, here's a noun in the accusative, ta erga, and look, here's another noun in the accusative, ton nomon. Well, which of these is the object of phile? just pause for a second and have a look. See if you can work out which of these is the object of philae. Both are nouns in the accusative. Is it God loves ta erga, or is it God loves ton nomon? Theologically, both are true, but which is true grammatically in this sentence? The answer, of course, is the object is ta erga. And the reason is the same reason we identified previously, that here is a preposition and its complement coming straight after it. The complement always follows directly after the preposition. You notice that pattern? The complement always comes directly after the preposition. That is one instance in which word order really does matter in Greek. And therefore, what you know about this accusative component of the sentence is that it's the complement of this, it's not the direct object of the verb. So this ta erga, the accusative plural of ergon, meaning a work, is the object of the verb. It means, of course, the works. Now, some of the sharp-eyed among you might have noticed that already, even before we get to the preposition, we've already made an assumption here, because I just said at this point, well, ta erga is accusative plural. Of course, ta erga could also be nominative plural. If you think about how the neuter article and neuter nouns decline, just remember, let's do the noun. Ergon, ergon, ergu, ergo, erga, erga, ergon, ergois. And therefore, erga, along with ta, could be nominative or accusative plural. How do we know that it's accusative in this case? Well, just look at the sentence as a whole. You know that you might have a nominative noun somewhere which is the subject of the verb because you've got a third person singular verb, philae. And so you look around for things that could be nominative. Hotheos could be nominative, ta erga could be nominative, and although the verb is singular, ta erga could, if this weren't there, could be the subject of the verb because neuter plural nouns take a singular verb. However, because hotheos is here, and hotheos couldn't be anything else other than the subject, that makes it far, far more likely that hotheos is in fact the subject. In fact, if you made this the subject, you've just made this completely redundant, and the whole sentence wouldn't make sense. And so taking the sentence as a whole, the different parts of it force other parts to occupy various grammatical slots, so that hotheos is the subject and ta erga must be in the accusative and is the object. Probably also in practice, word order is significant here. It's more likely on average, just in general, that the subject will come before the object. Not always the case. Please don't go taking that as a definite rule and say Steve Jeffrey says the subject always comes first. It doesn't. But on balance, given the weight of all the other evidence suggesting that this has to be the subject, making that the object, it's just another piece of reinforcing evidence you got there. So God loves or is loving the works. Okay, right, now we come to that little prepositional phrase at the end. Let me get rid of that. So we've got our familiar little graphic to highlight the structure of it. Kata, the preposition, ton nomon. And kata, when it governs a noun in the accusative, means according to, and then ton nomon, of course, is the law. Now, just take a look at that for a moment. God loves the works according to the law. God is loving the works according to the law. Probably it's a general statement about God's disposition towards particular works, and therefore God loves the works according to the law. Now, one final point about this sentence. This is not really how we would say things in English, is it? We wouldn't say, God loves the works according to the law. We would understand this to mean something like God loves works that are done according to the law, or God loves those works which are done according to the law, or something of that sort. And what this highlights is a couple of more subtle points, and if you've ever had a debate with anybody about the merits of various Bible translations, you will have encountered this, if only obliquely. That what we're trying to do when we translate from Greek into English, or indeed from any language into any other language, is to understand the meaning of the original language. And that can best be conveyed sometimes by a form of words that doesn't quite follow precisely the original phrasing or the original structure of the language you're translating from. In other words, to use some of the technical terms that Bible translators sometimes employ, some degree of dynamic equivalence is inevitable in translation. So when you get to debate about Bible translations, there is no really woodenly literal translation. At a philosophical level, such a thing is impossible. Now, you can read a great deal about this. If you want to read about the philosophy of translations, you can do so. There are lots of books about it. And what I've just said is a simplification, but you can see the significance of the point. But one other thought about this. When we are learning Greek, are we really trying to produce a translation into English? Or are we trying to do something else? Actually, what I want to suggest to you is we're trying to do something subtly different. We are trying to produce a translation into English. We are trying to understand what it means in English. But behind that, we're trying to understand what it means in Greek. We're trying to learn to, so to speak, think in Greek so that we can look at this sentence, ho theos phile ta ega kataton nomon, and we understand what this is saying. Even though at some level we might need to translate it into English in our minds in order to think of it in English. What we'd really like to get to is that familiar state that people who are fluent in another language get to, where they can start to think in the language that they're learning. That's what we're really trying to get to. And we'll get much more on this at a later date. Okay, final example, the third example, look at number 11. Trickier one, going from English into Greek. I fancy a different colour pen. Let's have a red pen. Here goes. God loves the peoples under heaven. God loves the peoples under heaven. Well, don't get carried away and forget all the basic things you already know. Let's find the verb. God loves. It's a third person singular verb, isn't it? God loves. Well, hey, look, I'm not going to waste your time just giving you what you've already got here. Ho theos phile is how we're going to translate that, isn't it? That's the subject. Here's the verb. So, ho theos phile. God loves. And now what we have is an object, the peoples under heaven. And the peoples is the object, and under heaven is telling you something about the object. So perhaps we want to say that the peoples under heaven is the object, but under is going to be a preposition and heaven is going to be its complement. So how do we do this? Well, first, the peoples. Well, people is laos, but people is a singular entity in the sense of a people or the people of Israel, and you can have therefore plural peoples, so laos, laon, lau, lao, laoi, laus. Laus is the accusative plural of peoples, meaning more than one people in the sense of more than one nation of people. And of course, God loves all those nations of people under heaven. That's what the English phrase is saying, and it's tous, laus. Accusative, masculine, singular. God loves the peoples under heaven, or what is the preposition in Greek which we translate under in English? Of course, it is, do you remember it? Of course you do. Hupo. It's the basketball hoop mnemonic. You start under the hoop before you shoot it. Hupo, hoop. Under heaven, and heaven is Uranos. Uranos, and we want the accusative of Uranos because hupo plus the accusative means under. So Uranos, Uranon. So let's stick that in. Uranon. Now, just one final, breathing, naughty. One final point about this. Sometimes the English word heaven translates the Greek phrase, literally, the heaven, ton uranon, and that might be present in some, sometimes you'd find that in Greek, sometimes you wouldn't find that in Greek, it just depends on the particular style of the writer. Also, what you'll sometimes find is that sometimes the English word heaven will translate the plural Greek, heavens, uranoi, which in this case, of course, will be accusative plural. So it's even conceivable that that English phrase under heaven could have arisen from the Greek tous Uranus. That's somewhat less likely, perhaps, and I'm not sure. I remember what Duff has in the back of his book. I think what Duff has in the answers is ton Uranon with ton in the square brackets, but I'm not sure. You can check that out for yourself. But this is how you'd write this sentence: Hotheos philei tous laus hupo ton Uranon. Just remember one final point though, the sandwich construction again. You've got this hupo ton Uranon floating around. Do you attach it to God loves under heaven the peoples, or do you attach it to the peoples? Well, the English phrase identifies quite clearly that under heaven is saying something about the peoples. So following the rules of the sandwich construction, which I showed you up here, the way you'd actually write that in sophisticated Greek is by putting hupo ton Uranon as the meat or the cheese and pickle in the sandwich of tous laus. And again, check out the index and look up sandwich constructions in Duff if you want to see that further. But what that would actually look like if you were writing it in competent quality Greek is hotheos philei tous hupo ton Uranon laus. Literally, God loves the under the heaven peoples. Now, if you wanted a demonstration that you can't have a literal word-for-word translation, there it is. We always translate at some level with a degree of dynamic equivalence. And we're now getting to the stage, you're getting to the stage in Greek, where your understanding of the Greek language is helping you to see that. And to my mind, it gives me a huge amount of respect for those hardworking people who translate Bibles, because they have to juggle all this stuff all the time. And these are easy sentences. You should see some of the stuff in the Greek New Testament that they have to deal with. It is no joke, I'm telling you. Anyway, we are done for now. That's 3 examples. Remember, keep working hard, 5 days a week, 6 days a week, little and often, 20 minutes a day, 30 minutes a day. We will have you reading the New Testament in Greek in no time at all. Any questions, just give us a shout, stick something in the comments, like, share and subscribe, and we will see you next time. Bye for now.